Greetings, and welcome back to Curiosities Obscura. We're thrilled to have you with us for another exciting exploration. Please don't forget to like, click the bell icon, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest adventures. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Imagine sitting down in a dark theater this November, popcorn in hand, eagerly awaiting the release of Wicked, the movie. The trailer has been playing non-stop for months now, and with all the hype surrounding it, there's a good chance you're as curious as I am about how it will live up to the expectations. If you're a fan of the Wicked musical or Gregory Maguire's novel Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West, you've probably been counting the days until the movie hits the screen. There's something undeniably magnetic about the story, what with all its mystery, magic, and of course, the Wicked Witch of the West. But here's the thing. Before all the songs, Broadway spectacles, and dramatic reinterpretations, there was something much simpler. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, the 1900 novel by L. Frank Baum. Now, we're diving deep into the origins of the Wicked Witch of the West. So buckle up, because we're about to take a journey from a modern reimagining all the way back to the 1900s to understand where this iconic character really comes from. Now, let's get this out of the way. Wicked, the musical, is incredible. It's hard not to get sucked into the whole defying gravity magic, the complexity of Elphaba's character, and the friendship dynamics with Glinda. But, and this is a big but, I have to admit, there's something about the original Wicked Witch of the West, played by Margaret Hamilton in the 1939 Wizard of Oz film, that just feels, well, timeless. And the thing is, this wicked green-skinned witch didn't always look like this. So, what exactly is the origin of this wicked character? How did she evolve from the villain in a classic children's story into a misunderstood anti-heroine, and eventually into Broadway's glamorous anti-hero? Let's start at the very beginning. And no, I'm not talking about Wicked or even The Wizard of Oz just yet. I'm talking about L. Frank Baum's original story. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz was first published in 1900, and you probably know the plot. Young Dorothy Gale gets swept away to the magical land of Oz, where she meets a bunch of weird creatures like the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion. Together, they go on a quest to meet the Wizard of Oz, who can help Dorothy return to Kansas. Along the way, they have to face the Wicked Witch of the West, who is dead set on stopping them. She's creepy, wicked, and not really the most pleasant person to be around. But why exactly is she the way she is? Here's where things get interesting. L. Frank Baum didn't just pull her out of nowhere. The character of the Wicked Witch of the West was, in fact, inspired by the old, evil witches you'd find in fairy tales. You know, the kind of witches who would curse young princesses or live in dark, spooky forests. But Baum also had a certain idea of what he wanted this character to represent. See, back in the late 19th century, America was facing some major political issues. Everything from the rise of industrialization to a growing divide between the rich and the poor. Some scholars argue that Baum's Wicked Witch of the West was a kind of metaphor for the evils of industrialization, the dangers of unchecked power, and the way big industries could harm people. In Baum's Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West is the ultimate villain. She's a tyrant ruling over the western quadrant of the land, and everything she does seems to be for her own selfish gain. She's the bad guy, pure and simple. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we get too far into Baum's world of Oz, we have to touch on a very important piece of literature that came much later. The 1995 novel, Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire. Here's where things start to get complicated, and honestly, a lot more fun. In Wicked, Maguire reimagines the Wicked Witch of the West, now named Elphaba, as a much more complex character. She's no longer just a wicked villain, but a misunderstood young woman who becomes an outcast because of her green skin. This is where the story takes a huge turn from Baum's version. Elphaba has depth. She has emotions. She's not purely evil. In fact, Wicked asks a question that wasn't even on the table in Baum's original work. Can someone who does bad things still be good at heart? Maguire explores the idea of morality and how people are shaped by the world around them, rather than just being born good or evil. It's this exploration of Elphaba's backstory and motivations that makes her more relatable. It's a sharp contrast to the Wicked Witch from Baum's story, who is one-dimensional and motivated by pure greed and malice. But wait, this is where things get even more interesting. While Wicked humanizes the Wicked Witch, Baum's original Wicked Witch of the West didn't come out of thin air. Baum's portrayal of evil witches had its roots in the deeper folklore and societal influences of his time. Let's take a look at a few key inspirations. Folklore and fairy tales. Baum's Wicked Witch of the West had all the hallmarks of witches in European fairy tales. In these stories, witches were typically depicted as old, wicked women with magical powers who would curse people and terrorize children. Think about the famous witch from Hansel and Gretel, who lured children into a gingerbread house to eat them. These evil witches were terrifying, and Baum knew how to tap into that fear with his character. But there's something more to it. While many witches were part of folklore, Baum's version was different because she didn't just cast curses. She represented a form of tyranny that threatened to ruin everything in Oz. The American political context. In addition to the classic folklore influences, Baum's Wicked Witch of the West is often interpreted as a metaphor for the industrial age and political corruption in America. At the time, there was a growing sense of disillusionment with the economic disparity in the country. Many believed that the industrial giants were abusing their power, and Baum's story mirrors this idea. The witch's power is one of cruelty and control, and she's constantly trying to keep the other characters in fear and submission. This is similar to how critics viewed monopolistic business practices in the late 19th century. The land of Oz and the American dream then. There's the land of Oz itself, a place that starts as a beautiful dream of opportunity, much like the American frontier or the promises of the American dream. But it quickly becomes a land filled with corruption, greed, and power struggles. Metaphors that reflect the dark side of industrialization and societal power imbalances. The Witch of the West, as the ultimate villain of this land, is a symbol of those who exploit that power for their own gain. And here's the thing about the Wicked Witch of the West. Why is she green? This question has lingered in the back of my mind for years, and I'm guessing you've wondered too. Well, it turns out the green skin was a visual decision made for the 1939 film The Wizard of Oz. It's not something Baum mentioned in the original book. It was all about creating a striking, instantly recognizable look for the character. In the film, the green skin helps distinguish the Wicked Witch from the other characters, and it adds to her otherworldly, unnatural appearance. But why green? It could be a reflection of jealousy and envy. Green often symbolizes these emotions. Also, it's likely that the filmmakers wanted her to look very different from the more natural, human characters around her. Green skin became the hallmark of her character, and it stuck. Over time, this visual became iconic, tying her forever to the idea of being other or out of place. So, when we look at Elphaba in Wicked, we see a lot of layers. She's not just the villain anymore. She represents what happens when a person is cast aside by society, forced into a life of rebellion, and eventually, tragedy. The witch's story evolves from just being about good versus evil to being about understanding the forces that create evil in the first place. Let's circle back to the core of this all, the Wicked Witch of the West. From Baum's original portrayal, this witch represented all that was wrong with power and corruption in the world, wrapped in the form of a magical, fearsome villain. And, over time, she became something much more than that, a symbol for all the misunderstood outcasts, those who were left behind, those who were labeled as wicked for things beyond their control. So, now, as you sit there in the theater this November, watching the latest adaptation of Wicked, you're not just watching a story about magic and power. You're watching a reinterpretation of one of the most iconic villains in literary history. You're seeing a complex character who's been shaped by history, politics, and societal forces. A character who started out as the embodiment of evil and has since been reimagined as something much more nuanced. And with that, we conclude our exploration into the origins of the Wicked Witch of the West. Join us in our next venture on Curiosities Obscura, quenching your thirst for curiosity as we continue to showcase the curiosities, oddities, and mysteries that shape our world. Until then, may your curiosity illuminate your path.